Hi, I'm Dr. Angela Plowhead, and I'm here with Representative Paul Evans, the incumbent Democrat candidate for House District 20. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Absolutely. So we're going to be talking about seniors and people with disabilities and getting your thoughts on that today. So tell us what you did for seniors and people with disabilities during your time in office.
Well, I've been elected to the legislature in 2014 and again in 2016, so I'm in my second term. I've done everything I can to make sure that the folks living in House District 20 have a strong voice in the Capitol to make sure that their concerns are heard. And in that particular instance, it means that making sure that seniors have an opportunity through Project Independence. We've tried to expand access to affordable housing. We have pushed the boundaries and actually recently changed how the Salem-Keizer Transit Board operates so that actually transportation is going to be a little more easy to get to in the future. And overall, we've tried to make sure that the services that are needed for everybody, not just the seniors, but everybody, are dealt with in a way that is both responsible and fair.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Tell us at least 3 of your positions that would encourage a senior or a person with disabilities to re-elect you.
I think there are 3 things that I would tell or ask anybody to consider. First is the value of service, the value of leadership, and the value of results. Over the last 30 years, I've been in and out of government as a city councilor, as a mayor, as a school board member. I've served 2 terms as a legislator, and I was a senior policy advisor to Governor Kulingoski. I think that understanding how government functions and what government should and shouldn't do matters. I think leadership matters. I led the fight to make sure that ballot measure 96 got to the ballot and that veterans got a 1.5% set aside of the lotteries, which have unlocked millions of dollars in terms of leveraging federal funds. So I know how to actually navigate the process. I know how to get things done. The third thing is results. I've stood up for seniors, especially at times when it wasn't necessarily easy to do so. In Oregon, anytime you support a tax, especially if you're in a swing district, that sometimes comes with a penalty. But I stood up to make sure that the hospital provider tax, which helped make sure that people had more access to health care, passed, and I'll continue to do the same. So I believe that at the end of the day, service, leadership, and results are the most important factors that make me the best choice.
Okay. Oregon Project Independence is a program that keeps seniors and people with disabilities in their own homes. And yet every year proposed funding for OPI is cut significantly. What did you do to protect current funding for OPI? And if re-elected, how would you ensure continued funding for this cost-effective program?
Well, to begin with, no person running for office should ever say that they guarantee how things will be decided in the Capitol. That said, I'll continue to do what I've done before. Inside the caucus as a Democrat, but a conservative Democrat, I've had a role in terms of making sure that we don't forget the fundamental value of ensuring that seniors can have an option. In rural Oregon, which I represent a district that includes some rural and some urban, it is especially important to recognize that making sure people can be independent in their homes is not just good policy, but in many ways it's actually the most efficient use of public resources. So in the next term, I plan on doing everything I can to ensure that that finer point isn't missed in the conversation.
Thank you. Give us a 2-minute overview of what you did in past legislative sessions to enhance services for seniors and people with disabilities.
Okay. Over the last 2 terms, several issues we've tried to tackle, and I think they've had an impact. Number 1 was raising the document recording fee. Not a very sexy subject, but something that actually has made a fundamental difference. We've raised it from $20 to $60, and that is set aside for housing construction and grants to make sure that housing is more affordable and available. We've also made sure that for folks in aging homes, that there's a new license requirement to ensure that people actually have a safer environment. We've worked very hard to try and curb elder abuse across the board. And as a legislator, I have pushed very hard to make sure that veteran services are fully funded. And what veteran services do, not just taking care of the veteran families, but basically freeing up state capacity that can be used for seniors that aren't veterans. So I believe over the last 2 terms I've actually made a good impact. I'm not sure it's a big impact, but I've made a good impact. And I believe over the next 2 years I can make an even bigger and more important one.
Okay, thank you. What will you do on a state level so that seniors and people with disabilities no longer face a lack of accessible and affordable housing?
Well, I go back to housing is really a 2-step problem. The first is we don't have enough inventory. And the second is, in our attempts to try and make costs more equitable, more fair, we have a very haphazard approach. So, to be very clear, I believe it's time to have a statewide declaration of emergency when it comes to housing. I actually have asked the governor to do so. It may be part symbolic, but it also allows some sharing of resources that aren't always done during normal times. What that would mean is that we would have the ability to put forward housing for emergency and temporary housing, and we would have more flexibility in terms of some of the rules and procedures about siting of homes, again, inside the urban growth boundary. I'm not talking about changing land use planning, but inside the urban growth boundary, there are some rules that might need a little bit of adjusting for local concerns. So what I'd like to do is build upon the work we've done, make sure the document recording fee that has set aside $30 to $40 million more dollars for support, and looking at regulations and trying to help home builders get in the business of finding incentives to build the kind of housing we need instead of the kind of housing we've been building for the last 4 or 5 years that is high on profit but not so great on actually meeting our needs.
Okay. How would you prioritize state funding, including funding that is matched with federal funds, for services to an increasing senior and people with disabilities population?
Well, I would continue to try to prioritize that in Tier 1. Every dollar we can draw down from the federal government is a force multiplier. And sometimes we have to retrain new legislators and educate some legislators that have been there a while about the value of helping people from New York and New Jersey and Texas help us with our priorities. Oregon is one of those states that often is giving more money to the federal government than the federal government is coming back to us in terms of our dollars. So we have to be smart about finding new ways to leverage resources, to identify gaps, to make sure that we're allowing as much federal dollar to be invested in the state of Oregon as possible. I think that we've made real progress in terms of veterans policies. There's some models there that I'd like to move over to senior care, senior transportation specifically, and I look forward to that opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Well, and thank you for joining us. We've been with Representative Paul Evans, who is the incumbent Democrat candidate for House District 20.